All right, it's going live now. Welcome to TLDC, good morning. We've got Bianca, Baumann, and Mike Taylor here today. It's not Video Friday, but it's still Friday. And I'm not Brent, as you can see. But we'll have some good time today talking about marketing and learning and development. Learning and development, community. Welcome to TLDC, and welcome to Bianca and Mike. I don't have Brent's sound effects, so yay from everybody at home. And because this was starting to echo for Bianca, can't have that, we will eliminate the echoing. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to TLDC. And yes, Brent is otherwise occupied today, asked me to fill in, and it's not Video Friday, it's Marketing Friday. So we're really glad to be looking at some stuff with Slack and chatbots, to be looking at MailChimp and some email stuff today, things that you can really use to help your training get to people better, and actually even designing some training within the marketing. So you should know both of these faces that are on screen today. They have been here before. Say hello, Bianca.
Hello, Bianca.
Great, right? George Burns.
Sorry, it was too
easy. Great. And we also have Mike Taylor here today. Hi, Mike.
Hello, everybody. You can see this is not going to be a bit fun at all today. That's a big concern here. No
it'll
fun.
Be horrible. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. It's going to be totally boring today. We're just going to talk about stuff and things. So marketing stuff. You have some screens to share, some things to go through. But first, let's just make it relevant to everybody who's showing up for training, who's showing up for learning and development kind of stuff. Can you make that link to marketing?
Yeah, I'm just going to get us started, and then Mike, you can just jump in wherever you see fit.
Absolutely.
I've been doing this work, I think about 3 or 4 years now, and I had the great pleasure of working in marketing departments while I was in L&D, and that's where I actually realized, hey, hold on a second, there's a lot of parallels in what we're doing. Mainly, we have the same end goal, which is engaging our audience. And I always like to say marketing actually does this slightly better than we do. I hate to say it, and I hope I'm not going to offend anyone on the call today, but they just have this way of speaking to emotions, and they have this way of being very precise in what they're doing. And yeah, just that engagement piece is just so much better than, what we currently do in L&D. And Mike, I'll let you jump in there.
No, I think you captured it pretty well, and I think it may be a little bit more than just a little bit better. So
I didn't want to
there's so many good things that we can borrow or steal or whatever verb you want to choose there from marketing. So it's very, very relevant and worthwhile to all of us.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm just typing in the chat to get your friends here too. Because this is a message that many people in learning and development kind of know they need to hear, but don't necessarily know what to do about it. And how to make things more engaging, how to be able to use some of the marketing playbook stuff in order to make the hard work that we're doing, the excellent work that we're doing, actually something that people care about, and that learners will show up for, and maybe even get excited about a little bit or something, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I think what I also want to kind of put a little disclaimer on what we're talking about today. We're not planning on transforming everyone from L&D to marketing. What we do in L&D is still really, really relevant and important. There's just ways of how we can elevate what we're doing right now and just kind of expand our horizon, right? So I think I just want to make sure that that message comes across, because I've been to conferences where people were like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, you know, there's L&D and there's marketing for a reason, and, you know, that's it. But you know, it's really more about, getting better at what we're doing, what we're already doing. But, you know, L&D will always be around in one form or another.
And, you know, I would add to that, I think some of the things you'll see today and some of the things that Bianca and I talk about a lot actually gives you tools and ideas to work more efficiently. So, for example, MailChimp, that we'll take a look at here in a little bit, I can set up autoresponders that basically run themselves. And so it's a way to extend the programs and the training that you've already got, make it better and send it to more places and be more efficient and effective. So, we're not replacing anything. We're supporting and enhancing for sure.
Yeah.
And I think the other angle that you could take with marketing as well, if you feel like, oh, there's a little bit too much right now for me, that change, right? I need smaller steps to get there. I think one way of looking at it as well is like, how do you actually promote your training, right? That's something we often forget about. It's just we create those e-learning modules or training, ILT, whatever it might be, and then we put it on the shelf and hope people will come and look at it. It doesn't necessarily work that way, right? Yes, if it's mandatory, people go there, but we could still promote it and make it a little bit more fun. And what are some ways of promoting it? What are some ways of engaging people before they even come to the training? And then the same holds true for the reinforcement after, right? So there's some great lessons to be learned from marketing on that engagement piece. Right.
Not just the one event. Okay, now you've had your training. Now everything is better, because of course everyone will remember every element of it, and it doesn't need any reinforcement later.
No, because they clicked the next button about like 200 times. So
yes. Now that's some reinforcement.
Oh,
next.
Right. That reminds me. Do you know that episode of The Simpsons where he actually leaves his workstation and he just
There's the little bird, the little drinking bird thing that's at the nuclear power plant, and he just keeps clicking yes, and then there's a whole meltdown. Yeah.
Sorry, didn't mean to, but it just popped.
No. Cool. Well, let's press the yes button on some of what you have to share today. It sounds like, Bianca, you'd like to go first with presenting something?
Yeah, let me do that here. Okay, you seeing my screen with a beautiful campaign on here right now?
Gotcha.
Ooh, yes, it is a beautiful campaign. All right, a workflow.
Yeah, so what is a campaign, right? So we just talked about, or Mike was mentioning, there's a great way of leveraging content that you already have and just repackaging it, so to say, repurposing it. And one way of doing that is using MailChimp and using what's called a campaign. And campaign is, or you just use the word workflow, which I actually really like as well. And it's just a way of, it's a multi-touch learning program, if you want. So, I mean, marketers use it, and we're all parts of campaigns, if we want to or not, because, you one time in your life, you've been to a website where you downloaded something, and the moment you downloaded something, you obviously put your email address in, and then you identified yourself to that organization as who you are. And then based on that, they're like, oh, this person just read a white paper, so they must be really interested in whatever the white paper was about. And then they create these content pieces that just fit your need, and they send out certain emails that, trigger you to do other actions, and then hopefully in the end, you're going to buy something. And so campaigns can be action triggered, as I just mentioned. Someone downloads a white paper or they watch a video or whatever. They can also be time triggered. So every week you want to send something out. We're probably also all part of some newsletter or another that we get on a regular basis. If you're not part of Mike's weekly newsletter on Friday, please sign up. So that's a time triggered one. Every Friday he sends out a newsletter, right? So those are ways of how you can actually engage people through a campaign. So campaign is really a workflow, as you're saying earlier, of different touch points. And it can be email, and that's usually what we're used to, but it could be other things as well. It could be it could actually be snail mail. It could be what we have here. I'm going to talk about in a second chatbot. It could be, I don't even know, video. So there's all kinds of different touch points, right? And so what we want to walk you through today and kind of show you how you can build a campaign is around health and safety. So we probably all have health and safety programs that we're running. And usually what happens beginning of the year, we have to go through them. We check the box, done for a year. And of course, we can't remember things. So why kind of, change this up a little bit and stretch out the content that you have over multiple weeks? That first off helps, with attention span, because we all know if you sit in front of the computer for an hour, like it's really hard. So if you have smaller bite-sized pieces that you can send on a regular basis, that already helps. And second, you really reinforce that learning as you go along. So what could this look like? And this is really just an example. So starting in the top left here where you see kickoff session, you could still have some kind of a kickoff session where you get everyone in a room and say, okay, talking about health and safety today, this is what this means for us, whatever, right? Just regular ILT session. But then what you actually start doing is, instead of having them sit in front of an e-learning course, you send out an email, and that email might have a link to an article you want them to read or a video you want them to watch, whatever it might be. And then the really cool thing is when you use campaigns in something like MailChimp, you can actually get a ton of data, which is beautiful. So you can see, hey, did Mike open that email? Oh, he did. Great. Did he actually click on the link that's in that email? Yes, no, right? So you can look at that. So if someone didn't open that first email, hence they also didn't look at the video or the white paper that you sent, you can actually automatically resend that same email. You might want to, change the content slightly so it's not exactly the same email, but it would still have the same link to the same content, making sure, the learner just doesn't miss out on that content. And all of this might sound really complicated right now, but Mike will show us in a second. It's actually easy to set this up, and you set it up once and you kind of can forget about it after, which is really cool.
And I would like to just interject here. This is more complicated than, as far as I know, any learning management systems are using right now. It's the kind of thing that we ask for a lot, or that we expect learning management systems to do, but marketing being in its own silo and developing its own solutions for their own use cases and their own needs, have things that we can start to borrow from while we're waiting for LMSs to catch up. Because everything that Bianca's sharing right now is the logic of it, the thinking through of the multi-touch points and everything is stuff that we can start to use now. And when other technologies, when the learning and development world starts to catch up a little bit, if you're on top of this, then you're ready to go as soon as the technology allows for it. So this is really valuable stuff. Thank you, Bianca.
Absolutely. Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, no, I just want to jump in on one thing. I think you used the word complicated. I just want to clarify. So it's really easy to do this stuff, and we'll see that in a minute. So it's maybe more valuable or powerful than it is complicated.
That's a good way of putting it.
That's a nice reframing.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah. And also in terms of technology, and I know these guys were on the cast already as well. Flype, Flype.
Yes.
They're actually, look them up if you haven't yet. They actually take that marketing automation piece and the LMS and married it. And I got a tour, and it's beautiful, and I'm in love with that product. It's amazing. So I can't wait for it to actually be, more out there. So you kind of continue, right? So you have a list of emails that you want to send out. In this case, there's 4 different emails, different topics every time you send out this email. And at every point, at every touch point, you can actually see if the email was opened or not. And then, you could resend it. What you could also do to kind of make it a little bit more exciting, but also keep the learning within the workflow. And I think that's something, big advantage of a campaign is that if you send content through an email and a chatbot, they're already there, right? They don't have to log into their LMS to look at something. So building something into the workflow, I think, is huge as well. So yeah, you send these different pieces through either email or, again, a chatbot, and link out to content that's, either on your LMS or on your Google Drive or whatever it is. The chatbot I'll be talking about a little later is a combination of Slack and Obi. So again, if your organization already uses Slack, again, they're there, right? You might as well use it. And despite me focusing on Slack and Obi today, there's obviously different IM tools that have their own little chatbots that you can set up. So the concept will be really pretty much the same. So you kind of walk them through the campaign to get all the content. And then in the end, I would always suggest kind of bring everyone back together in an ILT session, just to kind of make sure, are there any questions, comments, whatnot. One thing I want to mention for the email piece specifically is marketers use something that's called dynamic content. And what that means is you can create the framework of the email that will look the same to everyone. The content inside can be different based on job role, right? So if we think about health and safety specifically, usually there's some, ground rules everyone needs to know. But then depending on what your job role is, that might differ. So you have a different interest level in certain content pieces. So in order to increase awareness and motivation and engagement, you can really send the content that's only relevant to certain people in that email. So you would just set up the email once, and then again, depending on the job role, the system recognizes that automatically and sends the content that's needed. And I'll stop here. First off, see if there's any questions, of course, but then I'll also give it over to Mike to kind of walk us through the MailChimp piece.
Yeah, questions from anyone. It sounds like there's some great appreciation for your flow chart. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. But any questions about what Bianca's use the ask a question function, or you can just type it in the chat either way. And not seeing any questions. Going once, going twice.
And I see that.
Let's get on to more.
Oh, sorry, I just see that Jonathan is saying my org block Slack access even through the browser, because that's how I get in. I use the browser instead of downloading the app, and that it's not, the functionality is a little, but at least I can access it. Oh, even through the phone. Oh my, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Bummer.
Yeah.
Still great information. That specific tool of Slack and that specific, OB kind of add-on to Slack might not be something that you can use, Jonathan, but the logic, again, of what we're going through doesn't change. And just the names and the tools may change.
Yeah, there are a lot of other options too. So if one is blocked, don't give up. Just check what other channels might be available. So are we ready to jump over here to MailChimp real quick?
Yeah.
All right. Cool. So friend of mine has a domain. He's registered a domain. He's also a big MailChimp friend. He registered a domain. Chimpin' ain't easy. So I have to buy that from him if he doesn't use it soon. But so this is kind of the dashboard. A couple things before we get in. One of the things that I really like about MailChimp is the free version gets you pretty far down the path of getting into this and using it for actual real projects and programs. So they've got a free forever account, which will get you up to 2,000 subscribers, which you can send up to 12,000 emails a month. So I know none of the projects I've ever done have even come close to that. So I'm still able to stay on the free version. There are some features, some advanced features that are only available on the paid version, but unless you're pretty far along down this path, most people probably won't need those until sometime off into the future. So,
and I'll add one thing too about MailChimp for anyone who tried it out like 5 years ago or did something quite a while ago. In the last like 12 to 18 months, they've made a lot of improvements around marketing automation that they didn't have previously. So if you've checked out this specific tool in the past, it's kind of a different thing now and way better.
And they've also added the automation into the free version. It used to be a paid feature. Now it's also into the free version.
And one thing, sorry, Mike, to add as well, as we just talk about, tools and different tools and whatnot, like we're showing you MailChimp right now because it's free and it's great to get you started. But if you already have like a relationship like this with your marketing department, you might be able to actually use their marketing automation tool, which is probably, a whole thing above, a whole level above MailChimp, most likely, especially if you work in a bigger organization, right? So again, the concepts are the same. We just picked MailChimp to show you today.
Yes, cool. So just as a foundational thing, when you're working in MailChimp, you can use MailChimp just to send regular emails, so it doesn't have to be a big campaign. There are some nice templates in here. There's a nice designer thing that we'll see. But the basics are you need a list, which is the people who are going to get your email, and you need a campaign or a single email. It doesn't have to be a series. So those are the two elements that you need to know about. We've got a list in here. This is my personal account. So I've created a list for TLDC today. Looks like I've got 2 subscribers on there. They're just 2 versions of my email address. But so the list is the thing that you can either populate if you have the name. So if you're exporting from an LMS or an HR system, or if you've already got the name and addresses someplace else, you can import them yourself. Or the other way is you can create a sign-up form, a web form that you can say, hey, if you would like to get our newsletter, drop your email here. You can build a landing page. There's other easy ways that people can get onto your list that don't require you doing any kind of manual labor or spending a bunch of time managing your list. So that's another big benefit of MailChimp is it will run itself as far as subscriptions and unsubscriptions and all that sort of stuff. I built, let's see, where's my landing page? So I built this landing page. I'll drop this in chat. So this is just, I built this in like 5 minutes. This is really super simple. Tell people what it is, drop your email, subscribe. Let me drop this link over here in chat. So the management of it is really pretty minimal once you get things built. So there's the landing page. So that's the first piece. The second piece then would be your actual, what are you going to send your content? So in MailChimp terms, those are campaigns. So again, I built one of these this morning, and it looks like this. So probably easier and nicer to build visually designed, appealing things using some templates and tools here in MailChimp. I know this is better than my typical standard emails. Mm-hmm. And so really, really, even if I'm just doing them as one-off emails, there are a lot of advantages to working in MailChimp. So let me just give you a quick look behind. And
that's the official MailChimp soundtrack.
So they've also done an update recently, and things are in different places. So if I fumble a bit, I'm just going to create one to show you the authoring process. So I can create a campaign. So all of these different things: a sign up form, a landing page, an ad. If you're doing Facebook things, that's really probably more for marketers than learning people. If I go to email here, there are several different types that I can choose from. So a regular email is just sort of a one-off. I'm going to send it. I'm going to get data. I'm going to see who clicked what links and so forth. Automated is what Sam was mentioning. So this is where I can do an automated welcome when somebody joins my list. These are going to be dynamic content based on either some action or some time period, as Bianca was talking about. I can do some A/B testing. So if you want to get some data of 2 different versions, which one gets better results, you can do that. I'll just do a regular one here. The automated one would be, this would be how if you wanted to do an email course, let's say for onboarding, and you want that same sequence to go to the person every time they join. And no matter whether they join in January or December, they're still going to get the same sequence of content. So let's just call this demo campaign. Going to give me some choices. It's going to ask me, what list, who am I going to send it to? So I'll pick a list. I'll fill in some information about who do I want it to be coming from. So the name and email address, the subject line. Once you fill all that stuff in, when you're ready to design the actual email itself, so there's some nice templates here based on your content and personal preference. There are some design themes that are even more built out. Just pick one of these. And then this is what the content editor looks like. It's really straightforward drag and drop. I can drag text in, I can drag images. I can take one of their really nice looking ones and I can swap out pictures and just edit. So you can see the hardest part is having what you want to say and then your design, but the actual building it is really straightforward and simple. Once you have it in your head, you just build it and it comes out. They give you some nice testing tools, so I can say, what's this going to look like in my email? What's it going to look like on mobile? Which is yet another advantage. So this handles all the responsiveness. You don't have to even think about it. There's some really minor things about don't put gigantic photos in there that are 10 megabytes in size.
Right.
But really, the bulk of that sort of stuff is just handled. It doesn't care if it's desktop or mobile or wherever your people are reading your messages from. So questions, comments, reactions to any of this so far?
Yeah, great to ask. You're certainly getting a lot of impressed people here, appreciating what you have here behind the scenes in your MailChimp account. Great time to ask questions for Mike. I'll say again, for those who are accustomed to thinking in more of the LMS, learning and development mentality, even then, if you're doing like a dynamic learning assignment to a group based on job role or something like that, even then, you've still got essentially two campaigns when you launch something. You've got the initial launch of, hey, this is a new thing. That's that one-time email part that relevant in time. And then you've got that ongoing piece of whether they're hired in January or they're hired in December, here's the same kind of thing that they're going through. And that's a completely separate campaign. They may be related, they may be sharing the content, but as far as how we would manage it, it's like a second thing, and it often gets confused in talking to stakeholders. So the more that you can understand about how this really comes from marketing, the better you can leverage it, no matter what your tool set is.
Yeah, and the other piece that's if you do it as a series, so the perfect example I like to use is a compliance course. So if it's a safety or information security or whatever it is, you've already got assets, you've got images, and you've got videos and whatever your media is in your course. Why not pull bits and pieces of that out, set up an email campaign over the course of the rest of the year, and then you can take small bits and pieces and reinforce and focus learning bits, and then you're going to reinforce that and extend it, and you're going to get better outcomes, better learning outcomes in the end, because now we're hitting them with the course and we're hitting them with an email campaign, and maybe we get some interaction with using our chatbots, and we're starting to build out what is much more like a marketing campaign with multiple channels and multiple touch points. And again, we've already got the biggest effort already invested in the course. Just pull things you've already got and repurpose them, pull them apart. This is another thing that marketers are really good at, is they take and they repurpose. You'll make a slightly different version, or they have 15-second commercial, a 30-second commercial, and they're really good at taking content and repurposing it for other purposes, other channels. I think one of the examples that we used in our DevLearn workshop was, I can't remember who did it, but they took an ebook and they repurposed it into 120 different individual pieces for different places and different channels. So I think that's another. Yeah, and that's another thing that we can steal from marketers is, don't reinvent the wheel. Take what you've got and repurpose that as much as possible.
Yeah, great.
And so this is just an example of a campaign that we used for the workshop. You know, you can do some branding in here, right? So when people see, if you do good stuff and you have a style and a brand, you know, when people recognize that, you know, they're going to maybe take notes, set up and take notice a little bit more. I think one of the things a lot of learning people that I know don't realize is you have a brand whether you realize it or not. And, you know, if you don't realize it, it may not be so great. And so it's worth spending a little bit of time of, you know, identifying yourself with a positive experience.
And I really like
That's a very polite way to put it.
And I really like, Mike, what you said earlier about, you know, it's the building of all of this is actually not that complicated. The tough part is to really figure out what you want to put in, right? So I highly recommend you obviously start playing around with the tool a little bit so you understand how it all functions, but then put it aside and start planning on a piece of paper or, you know, a Word document or whatnot, so you don't get like carried away with all the, you know, amazing things you can do in there, and really start focusing your message. And I think that's something marketing is really good at, is like short and succinct writing, right? Like we write these courses that are just like going on and on and on, right? And at the end you're like, did I just read? Whereas marketing, you know, they're very, very precise in their messaging.
Yeah, and I'll second that sentence. If you can do like a flow chart like Bianca showed in the beginning, like that's the hardest part, is getting the logic and what you want to say. Once you have that in place, the rest of it's just sort of walking through the formula and say, okay, I want this email to come and when does it go and what triggers it. What I've got on my screen here right now is an automated sequence. This can be triggered by a bunch of different things. It can be triggered by time. It could be triggered whether somebody opens an email. It could be triggered if they don't open the email. So there's a lot of dynamic options here to make it do what you want it to do. And the beauty of it is you'll spend a small investment up front to set it up, but then it's going to run itself. And so you can see here, this is just a list that is going to send an email, several emails just one day after the other. So it's one day after they get the previous email, they get the next one. And there's lots and lots of options and possibilities for building that. And then one last thing here, and then I'll send it back to Bianca so we can do some chatbot stuff, is the data. So we've talked about that a little bit. So this is really nice. This is going to give me a whole bunch of things. So I don't have a lot of data on this particular campaign, but you can see the type of things that I can get. So I get opens rates. I can get not only the opening rate, but I can see who opened it. If I've got links in my email, I can see, okay, well, which links are the, and I can get all the way down to the level of who is clicking which links. So if I see some person maybe who's clicking a support link 25 times, you know, maybe that's either something is off, or I can reach out to that person and say, hey, is there something I can help you with what's going on? So it's going to give us some visibility. You know, we put a lot of things out into LMSs, which are like a big black box, but we never know what's happening with them really. And this is a really great, easy way to start, get some data that helps us improve our work and what we're doing.
And I just
Fantastic.
I wanted to add, you said two things. One thing you said, open rate and click-through rate. Just so open rate meaning, you know, someone opens that email, and it's really important that you're good at writing that subject line. And that's really tightly connected to writing a good course title as well, right? If you think about what engages someone, right? Often we think about building that e-learning course, and the title is kind of like a second or an afterthought, right? But just like an email has an interesting subject line, and you know that from your personal life, you know, you open it or you don't, and that you can really also use for, you know, what you call your course itself. And then, click-through rate, as Mike was saying, is, you know, that really shows their interest in the content itself, because now you have their you pique their interest in terms of, oh, what is this all about? And if they actually click on the link, you know you're on the right path, right?
Yep. And this is, I just want to just show, this is sort of down at this fairly granular level here, where I could even see, okay, this person opened it at this time, they clicked this link at this time, so I can get really specific. You know, maybe all the activity is happening at the end of the month when there's a certain activity, so I can time my delivery of content around that. And there's a lot of insights that you can get from just a simple email campaign that you wouldn't otherwise have to improve whatever you're doing.
And one thing I want to add in terms of, I know we keep on saying, and one thing, there's just so many things.
There's so many good things.
There's so many good things, but this is actually more of a, well, you got to be careful who you send these emails to, right? So if it's internal, you're fine, but there's actually a law that's called CAN spam, or if you're in Europe, GDPR. So as you send out emails externally, if you are, educating people outside your organization, you got to get their approval in order to email them. So just be careful with all of that. But internally, you should have no problems.
And it's also nice. There's a place in MailChimp where you can put a little bit of text of why you're getting this. So you could say you're receiving this email because you subscribed after a TLDC webinar, or because your job role requires this communication. So it helps to say why they're getting it. Kind of my golden rule is whenever I put something out, I should always let them have some channel of communication back. Or like, I hate those emails. Do not reply to this email. Don't do that. Yeah. Whether it's you or a general box or something, facilitate those conversations, and just that reminder of why they're getting it is always helpful.
That's great. And Bianca, you mentioned GDPR. There's been certainly a lot of activity around that in the last year. And I know MailChimp specifically has some blanket text. They are GDPR compliant. They have just little check boxes that you can check that apply a lot of that legalese as needed into the sign-up form, into confirmations, and putting it at the bottom of emails and all that good stuff. We've been asking for questions a couple of places along the way, and we do have some questions coming in. And TLDC happily uses MailChimp. Thank you for that, Louise. So if you've ever gotten a TLDC email, you are seeing something from MailChimp. And we should pause for station identification here. Hopefully everyone knows where they're at. The training, learning, and development community is what we're all a part of here. And hopefully all of you know about the upcoming TLDC conference. There is one more chance, and it's just today, to get into the conference for, I think, what is it, like $400 off or something like that. There's the last registration deadline at this price point is today. So if you're not yet registered for TLDC 19, you can pay for it tomorrow, but you'll be paying more money. So it's just go ahead and do it today. It's way easier, and who wants to spend more money anyway, right? It's $495. Great. Okay. Thanks for that, Luis. Hopefully everyone here is already all registered for that conference, where we'll be getting great content like this in a more face-to-face format. Will either of you be joining us for that conference in January in Phoenix?
I wish, but not this year for me.
Same here, unfortunately. But
all right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll keep
next year.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
We're going to put it on our agenda early enough to make sure to get the approval from work to go.
Yes. Well, end of January in Phoenix is a great place to be anyway, whether work knows about it or not.
Yeah, that's a good point. Especially I'm in Toronto and it's cold in January. So. Yeah. Yes,
I'm sure. So let's get to some of these questions here real quick, and then we'll go back to you, Mike. Alan had asked about Slack. Would this work with other tools like Microsoft Teams or Yammer? I think this is for you, Bianca.
Yeah, absolutely. So Obi itself, no, because that only works with Slack. But as we talked about earlier, right, like there's different bots that work with Microsoft Teams. I know actually for Microsoft Teams, GP Strategies, we created our own internal chat bot that works with Microsoft Teams, and it's actually pretty simple. You can hit me up offline if you want to. I can send you some more information around that. But yeah, there's certainly different ways of and different chatbots that work with Team or Skype or whatever you have in your organization.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that question, Alan. And we'll share contact information at the end.
Exactly.
Today's session. Next question is, how do people respond to questions related to their interaction with emails? So do you ever feel, do you ever feel like they find it invasive? This is a question from Kristen.
So I'll kind of talk about my experience of stuff. Again, depending on your requirements, all of the ones that I've ever done have been opt-in, which means they're also opt-out. So if you don't like it and we're not giving you the value, then you unsubscribe and go on your way. Which I think sort of leads to another thing, that's sort of a foundational thing that we should all be thinking of, is just being valuable and helping people, and the whole empathy thing of what do people need, and not spamming people with unnecessary thing and gigantic walls of text that nobody's going to read and that sort of stuff. So I think there's two pieces there. Is always try to provide as much value as possible, and then let them opt out.
Yeah, and I think
Great
we had
point.
one question that might be kind of similar to that in our DevLearn workshop, where someone said, "Oh, we already get so much email, and it's just getting lost, and this doesn't add any value." And I can certainly see the concern there, because yes, we have so much email, so many emails to go through every day. But first off, with the campaign, you can resend them. And if you start using something like this, you can't just start doing it. You have to manage expectations with your audience. You have to let them know this is something that's coming. And you kind of also have to set the expectation of you have to do this, right? Like at one time or the other, we let you choose when during the week you want to do it, but eventually, you need to have that governance, so to say, right? So you need to have your managers and your stakeholders on board, so they can actually go in, pull the data and say, hey, go to someone's desk and say, it would be nice if you actually looked at this, right? But I think despite having all these emails in our inbox, I still see the big advantage it's in the workflow compared to having to log onto the LMS, right? So for me, that certainly trumps all the emails we get.
And I'll second that too. Like, I will, if you give me a nicely designed email that's short and sweet, and I can get something from it in 30 or 60 seconds, I'm happy to do that. I'll take my bit and I'll go on where I was headed. But if you're asking me to go log into the LMS, which is more friction than I want to deal with from the top before I even get to the content, it's just a much different experience. It feels different. And if you build it the right way, I think people would be pretty receptive to it.
That's great. One last question from Thomas, who is saying that his company doesn't have the IT infrastructure for some of the tech that we're discussing today, but they do have Constant Contact, at least on the marketing team. Does it have similar capabilities as what you were just showing for?
Yeah,
MailChimp?
it does. It does. Yeah. And there are a bazillion others as well.
Exactly. So yeah, just make friends with your marketing team. I always say bring cookies. Everyone likes cookies. And, just sit down with them, get to know them a little better. And, don't give them the feeling of you want to take over their jobs or their platform, right? Like, chances are, especially in the beginning, they won't let you log into the platform and build your own emails. But as you, develop that relationship, eventually I think they'll let go a little bit, and you might get your own admin access eventually. But, initially I think it's really great to just ask them to help you and let them send out the emails. And then as everyone gets more comfortable, I'm sure there shouldn't be any issues.
Great. All right. Well, back to you, Mike.
I think, Bianca, do you want to jump over and do some chatbot stuff?
Yeah, let's do it. Okay. So as I mentioned, I am using a mix of Slack and Obi. Obi is a Canadian company, actually. And I think they're one of those fastest growing 500, fastest growing companies, startups, whatnot. Really, really cool people. So as you come in here, and the easiest way is to actually have your Slack channel first, and then you go to ob.ai, and then you can just log in with your Slack credentials, and it just verifies everything, and then you have an OB workspace, so to say, for a Slack channel. So just opening up Slack here. So I have a whole bunch of different Slack channels, but if you want to add OB in, you have to do it for every channel individually, right? So you see it down here under the apps, it actually shows up. But where you actually start working is not in Slack, you actually start working in OB. It does automatically add itself to Slack, but if you want to work on the back end to add content, that's where you would go first. And OB is really cool. It connects, it allows you to push out content like, YouTube, any kind of URLs that you have. If you're Google Shop, it actually pulls information from your Google Drive. You just have to be really, really careful how you set up your Google Drive in terms of, what can be found by OB, because OB answers to what, how, and why questions, and I'll show that to you in a moment. And you can put in certain responses, which is really cool. But if you just kind of leave it more open and say, hey, what you got for health and safety, you might get meeting notes from like 10 years ago, right? So you got to be really careful how you connect it all. But as you first come in here, you actually end up in what's called the bookshelf. And the bookshelf is really where you can, add more content that sits within OB if you don't want to, use your Google Drive or any other external links. So you can add a book from down here, and I just did one here as an example to kind of stay with our health and safety feature. So I have this first step here where I actually added in a little video, and it's just loading. And all I was saying to them is like, hey, watch this short video to get started. They would do that, and then, there's a little quiz. So obviously you can add as many pages as you want here. You can add as many books as you want. So the bookshelf, when you come in here, initially they have a whole bunch of templates as well, actually, which is really cool. So you can kind of see how they built this. Also, if you go actually to their help section, they obviously use OB to, help. So you can kind of see how they build it up. So that's a bookshelf. So that's one thing that you have in OB. For me, the biggest bang for the buck, it's free. So is what's called flows. So in the bottom right corner here is where you can build flows. And this is where the connection between Slack and OB comes in. So a flow is similar to what Mike was just sharing with us, a workflow, right? A campaign. And I built one out here. And so these are the different steps that I have in here. And you can schedule these, one day after assigned at a certain time, 2 days, 3 days, whatever you want. And then, you can have these different steps, these different flows, and you have like different links, different videos. You can also have a flow step here that actually links back to a book that I just showed you in the bookshelf, right? So really, really cool here. It's very simple. You add the step, you just enter your text here, whatever it is, and then it allows you to attach any resource. And here you can see you can attach to a book, a page that you've created, or a quiz. So whatever is green is what lives within the OB environment. And then an image, Dropbox, Google Drive, or any other link, which, could just be any URL that you're using. So let's just do MailChimp. Just for fun. Oh, of course.
The W's aren't enough.
They're not enough.
Okay.
And then you can go in here and schedule this, right? So I would probably just go 5 days, 9 a.m., whatever, right? So, and there's no save button. So as you work, it actually saves it automatically. You see that every now and then in the top right corner. And then once you're done, you just hit the done button. So that's one thing. So there's the books, the flows. And the last thing I want to show you before we go into Slack and I show you how this actually works is called responses. So responses allows you to put in some questions. So in general, OB answers what, how, and why questions. That's just what he can do. And I don't know if it's a he or she. I always say he. I don't know, like OB. So you can add additional questions in here, like, for example, are we off on December 25th or 26th? Because what I love about these responses is OB doesn't just push content. It also allows learners to pull content, right, by asking these questions, which is really, really neat. So you can put, especially for new hires, I find is really helpful. What's the Wi-Fi password? Everyone is asking that all the time. What's the office address? What's the zip code, right? Like there's certain questions that come up all the time, and you can actually put them into OB, and then, your learners can just put them in there. So all of this is free. However, if you get the paid version, you get a ton of data, which is beautiful. Right now, if you use the free version, there's no data. So you're kind of walking in the blind a little bit. But what that looks like if you go into Slack, and obviously I started playing around with this ahead of time to make sure it's actually working. So, if I enter that question, for example, are we off on Christmas? And I can't really see. Let me see. Let's type this here. There we go. Am I still sharing my screen?
Yep.
Yes, you are.
Okay, perfect, because I couldn't see the bottom piece here. Are we off on Christmas? And I put this in here, and then Obi actually gives me this little, answer here. Oh, couldn't find anything. Oh, I think I said, are we off on December? There we go. So you can see if you're not precise enough, you wouldn't know, right? So couldn't find an answer to your question. Of course, this is, so let me go back here and see what I actually put. Are we off on December? Oh, I said
December 25th.
24. See, there we go. So let's try this one more time. Are we off on December 25th? And now it should work. Maybe. Yay, there we go.
Yay.
Yes, happy holidays, right? So, and it's not even the full question. I didn't have to put in the 26th, but 24th wasn't in there, so it didn't recognize it. So these are the responses. If you wanted to start that flow, either automatically when you come to Slack and the flow has been assigned, it would be pushed through and you would get like a little red one telling you, hey, there's something to do. But I can also just start the flow. And each flow has a number, which you can figure out through Slack. And then I just say start flow. And I obviously already started this, but did you want to continue it? And I just say no, so it'll start over. And it gives me those little fun, little messages in between. So here's my first step. So you saw in the flows earlier, we created 5. So this is step 1 of 5. And it actually links to a book that I had created. So I showed you that book earlier, First Steps, Take the Quiz. So this is the first link. And then I can come back to Slack and I can either just leave it, I can snooze it, or I can say, yep, I did what I had to do and I just mark it as complete. And then automatically it would send me that next step, right? So that's the polling feature. If I just leave it and don't do anything else, it would just push the content the next day, right? And then here's a video. And so you kind of go through, all these different steps and all these different things that I put in, right? So that's kind of what this looks like on the front end. Any questions?
Yes, we have 2
Okay.
already from Kristen and from Jonathan. And I also have an answer too that I'll post in the chat. Apparently, according to the baby names directory, it's both a boy's and a girl's name, and the girl's name has been more popular since 1948. And there's a whole chart and everything.
There you go.
Just in case
Who
you
knew?
I just think Obi-Wan Kenobi, but
yeah, that's true. That's true.
So to the questions, Kristen's question. Do you know if that question space allows you to type different versions separated by commas, like what's the Wi-Fi password? How do I get on Wi-Fi? Do we have Wi-Fi, etc.? How, in terms of the language recognition, how do you put that or condition in?
Yeah, so you would have to create a new response every time you do that, which in the end is not that difficult because, you don't even have to hit a save button. You just put it in and copy and paste your answer. So it's a little bit more cumbersome, but yeah, there's no and or functionality in there. So you would have to do exactly that. And you just saw, right? Like if you don't hit it exactly, it can't find the answer. However, it's also learning over time, which is quite interesting. So as you use it more and more, it'll start picking up and it asks you actually the question of like, did I get this right? Yes, no. And if you say yes, it's like, okay, great. I'll remember that for next time. No, okay, I'll promise I'll get better, right? So it has these little funny ways of interacting with you.
Yeah, great. And so the flow that you were showing, this is a question from Jonathan Rock. The flow that you were showing was for scheduling posts or direct messages or both?
It's a mix, basically, right? It sends you, and let me just share my screen again so you can actually see it here. Because if you look at Slack, right, it shows up as an app, but basically it sends you a direct message. And then within that direct messaging piece, you have these different posts that you can click on and look at, right? So it doesn't show up under direct messages, but you're the only one that would see your version of OB, whereas, if Mike were connected to this, he would see something else, right? Does that make sense? Does that answer the question?
Is it also scheduling posts that go to, say, general or random or anything like that?
Oh, I see. No, they all show up in the OB channel, so to say, or in the OB apps, messaging, whatever you would call it. So no, you cannot put it into different channels. It always shows up in the OB channel.
Great. I think that answers that. And any other questions that anyone has to throw in? We're coming into the final 5 minutes of today's session here. So more questions are certainly welcome about anything to do with marketing and learning and development, but specifically this chatbot functionality is really great to see. I've personally experimented with Obi a little bit as well, and this I was doing it like a year ago, so I think they didn't have some stuff worked out. I was never able to get it authenticated right. But after watching this, I'm definitely going to go back in one of the Slack groups I managed to test it out. Yeah, thanks for sharing.
You're absolutely right. Like they had some, little hiccups when they first got started, but just like MailChimp, like the last couple of months have been really good for them to add some more functionality. And then also if you get that paid version and you get the data behind, that makes a big difference as well, right? And I know we went through this pretty quickly now, but they have an excellent help section as well. So just start playing around with it and get a feel for it.
Great. Jonathan does ask, I think, a rather tongue-in-cheek question that we could take a crack at because we have 2 minutes or less. So in 2 minutes or less, you've got a compliance e-learning course in your LMS. How would you use this to revolutionize that process? This is bringing it back to what's a very real-world condition that all of us are dealing with, especially this time of year, building stuff for the upcoming year.
So I think I would start with some like a content analysis to kind of see what's actually currently in that course and really sit down and write it all out and link to whatever it is that you have and really take a very good look at that content and then see how you can cut it up into smaller pieces so it still makes sense. The pieces still make sense on their own. And then decide which delivery channel would work best through either a campaign or the chatbot functionality. And Mike, I'm sure you have something to add there.
Yeah, so I would use it. We talked about repurposing and supporting it throughout the year. That's one way. The other way is as I would use it to give them some realistic decisions to make based on the content. So email scenario-ish. Right. So one of the things that I've seen that I really, really love around cybersecurity was so you take the course, then over the course of the year, you get emails. Some of those emails may be intentionally designed to look like a phishing email. Mm-hmm. So you don't know it's coming from the L&D department or the compliance department. And if you click on the phishing email, the fake phishing email, now you need some refresher, right? Now you get a different set of content because now you've inappropriately applied what you are supposed to learn, right? And so to me, there's super, super powerful opportunities in that type of approach.
Yeah, great real world use case. Thanks for that. And thanks again to both of you for being here today and sharing what you're working with and making it more accessible for our entire TLDC community. Yeah, Kristen's responding to that last part that you were just sharing there, Mike. Just because you can do something doesn't mean that it's always like the right approach for your culture and for your company. I have seen certainly many examples of email marketing can go horribly, horribly wrong. And we've all received, stuff where we didn't opt in. And just because it can happen and all these great tools are here, doesn't mean that you automatically get it all right on the first try. Just like designing a course.
Exactly.
And when you're using email to do things like direct people to training, really thinking that through, as Mike mentioned earlier, from a place of empathy, of really trying to help people as opposed to, control people. It doesn't feel good when people are trying to control you, but when people are trying to help you do your job better, when they're trying to help you not get in trouble, then that's a very different feel for everyone. And so there are some horror stories out there of people that did it wrong, but it doesn't mean that the tools are bad. It just means you need to learn to use them.
Yeah, and I also think, right, if you don't have the right content in place, you can't put lipstick on a pig, right? Like you've got to have the right content in place because otherwise all of these beautiful things we just talked about won't make a difference to your learner, right?
Yeah, well, that's a great point to end on. And Bianca, thank you. Where can people find you, contact you, see you
Yeah.
on the interwebs?
Well, you guys can see us, Mike and I, at Learning Solutions in March. So we will be
Great.
there.
Yay.
Super excited for that. And then you can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter. And for some reason right now I can't get into my LinkedIn. But yeah, it's just Bianca Baumann. So just 2 N's. So make sure that. So that's the Twitter handle, and that's also for LinkedIn, and that's also my website, biancabaumann.com.
Great. And Mike?
Yeah, so pretty easy. I'm pretty easy to find, I think. T Mike T on Twitter. Just drop my website in there, and can find me on LinkedIn and Twitter and probably half a dozen other places via that website link.
Yes, and as Bianca mentioned at the beginning, go sign up for Mike's weekly email, and you'll get to see the front end of what a lot of this looks like to be on the receiving end of. And I'm sure you can probably ask Mike questions about, well, how did it know this, and how did this happen?
Yeah,
thank
absolutely.
you again for your generosity.
Absolutely, always happy to help if anybody has questions about anything.
Same here. You know where to find us now.
Great. Well, I'm going to say thank you again, and we'll let your screens go here as we give a last plug for TLDC 19. Thanks again, Bianca.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
Bye, Mike.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Yes, TLDC 19 coming up soon, and you could pay more, but why? Today is the last day to get in on this price point. So if you're thinking of coming to enjoy Phoenix at the end of January, which is a very nice place to be at the end of January, better than a lot of other nice places, certainly than where I am at the end of January, I'm just going to go to Phoenix. That's going to be nice. And really looking forward to seeing so many of you that we see here in chat all the time, and our Slack group face to face. It's really a different experience. And if you are already coming, get the word out, spread the word. You know how much value you get from TLDC, from the daily episodes that we're doing here, from the Slack group, from all of the offerings, from our weekly emails that Luis sends out on MailChimp. You know how much value you get from the community. If there's some people that you would like to bring, that you would like to help them get value from TLDC as well, send them the link to tldc19.com today, and let them know this is the last best time to sign up. And of course, they can sign up later too, but you're helping them get even more value when you share that today. So on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Dasher, on Dancer, happy Friday, everybody, and have a fantastic weekend. Oh, and I have my music to outro by. Let's see, where we go. And yeah. Thank you for watching TLDC. Thank you for being a part of TLDC. Thank you for being here. Have a fantastic weekend, y'all. And we'll see you next week. More great good stuff coming up next week on TLDC. We've got Trish Yule coming up. We've got a bunch of good folks are coming up. I'm looking forward to Trish. We've also got Elliot Garbhus. We've got Cassie will be here, and Margie Minkum will be here too. Tune into TLDC. Come on to TLDC 19. Spread the word today. Spread the word today. Yeah, 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 yeah. Thanks, everybody. Swivel chair spin, yes. I'll take that as applause. Thank you, Jonathan. And thanks again to Mike and Bianca. Hope this inspires you to do some good stuff. Get on out there and use it to what does Brent say? Go out and learn somebody or train somebody, or go do that thing. Brent will be back next week. See you then.